The Story of Salt by Mark Kurlansky, illustrated by S.D. Schindler. When you're getting ready to read a complicated expository text, such as The Story of Salt, it's helpful to set your expectations for reading ahead of time so that you can kind of prepare your brain for thinking about what you're going to read. Before reading this text, I didn't particularly think of salt as anything remarkable. And so the idea of an entire book, and this is simply an excerpt from a much larger book, being completely about salt and its influence on, as it says here, ancient civilizations, empires, and led to scientific discoveries, kind of surprised me. So I'm going to be looking for some main ideas and supporting details that add to my understandings of salt as I read through here. I'm going to switch this to single page view. What is salt? The earth is made up of 92 natural elements, which combine in nature to form compounds. Salt is a compound produced when sodium, Na+, a metal so unstable that it easily bursts into flame, combines with chlorine, Cl-, a deadly poisonous gas. This natural occurrence is known as a chemical reaction. Think of it as two people who misbehave on their own but play well together. The two elements stabilize each other, and the resulting compound, sodium chloride, is neither explosive nor poisonous. This is what we call salt. Salt is the only rock eaten by human beings. In fact, all mammals, including humans, need to eat sodium chloride in order to live. Sodium chloride is needed for breathing and for digestion, and without salt, the body could not transport nourishment, oxygen, or nerve impulses, which means that the body would not function at all. In the sidebar here, it tells me a healthy adult's body contains about 250 grams of salt, which would fill 3 large salt shakers. Our bodies continually lose salt through bodily functions, and the supply needs to be constantly replenished. All right, so now I'm going to take some notes on this. Salt is a compound of sodium and chloride, both poisonous on own. Salt is necessary for all mammals. And then I'm going to give some subsets under here. So what I'm doing is basically outlining this, which is a strategy you can use to stay on top of reading as you're doing so. It helps you keep track of what you're reading. There we go. Necessary for all mammals, and it tells me it needs to move nutrients. Trying to put this in my own words so I can check to make sure that I understand it better. Oxygen, transport, nerve, these are their words, nerve impulses. All right, so salt is definitely pretty important. By the way, if you're in a little bullet pointed outline like this, if you want to go back to the previous section or the previous level, you can hold down Shift and hit Tab, and it will move it back all the way. In this case, I want to move back completely. How to make salt. The 4 most common ways to find salt in nature are on the ground in dry salt beds, in the oceans, in underground springs, and in rocks under the earth. Humans first found salt on the surface of the land where ancient salt lakes had dried up. Animals who need even more salt than people were usually the first to discover these places, sometimes called salt licks because animals would go lick the salty ground. When humans wanted to gather this salt, they simply scraped it up from the ground. Okay, so it seems like I'm going to come up with a couple of different ways how to make, let's rewrite that, make salt by So salt lick on ground, in ocean, underground, springs, and rocks. All right, let's see what else there is. The most plentiful source of salt is the ocean, but seawater must be boiled for many hours before the water has evaporated and only salt is left. This is a very expensive way to produce salt because a great deal of fuel, such as wood or coal, must be burned up. The fuel may be more valuable than the salt. One solution is to enclose the seawater in man-made ponds at the edge of the ocean and let them heat in the sun. This is a very slow process. The ponds can take more than a year to evaporate to salt crystals, but both the salt and the sunlight are free. Another source of salt is rocks that are mined under the ground. There are large salt deposits in many parts of the United States, including Louisiana and Texas. Rock salt is still mined under Cleveland and Detroit today. Most rock salt is extremely pure. Once miners turn on the lights, each salt mine looks unique. Some have black or gray walls, and others are so white they look like a snowstorm just passed through. Some have white stripes, while others, such as the mine in Cardona in northern Spain, have brightly colored stripes. Some mines have underground rivers and lakes that can be crossed by boat, and one mine in southern Poland even has ornate rooms carved out of salt. So they make salt by finding it in salt licks on the ground, in the ocean, underground springs, and rocks, and it seems like a really tough process. I wonder if that's why, when I combine the fact that it seems like a tough process or takes a while, takes time, and yet all mammals need it, that could be why salt has been so important throughout history. So now I'm going to read about salting civilization. And it's always a good idea to zip through a book and just get an idea of what you're going to read for it, doing a preview. Salt preserves. I like the pictures in this book. They make me laugh. Salt dynasties. I know that a dynasty is when people in power transfer that power to people they've chosen, often their sons or daughters, and that in that way one single family or one single group stays in power for a long time. Soy sauce, yum. Meals and mummies across the desert. An empire of salt, words salted by the Romans. North America's shortcoming. How salt lost its glitter. And then there's this really cool diagram of salt through the centuries. I'm going to turn it back to 2-page spread so I can see both of them there. Wow. Interesting. Now it's your turn. Please start on the page we ended reading on. So we're going to go back here to Salting Civilization. Read the rest of this story. You can also listen to it on Connect Ed and take some notes on the main idea and important details. Don't overload your notes. You're not looking for the minor details, just the most important ideas so you can come back to it and remember what you've read. You also might want to note anything particularly interesting that you'd like to write about. Then, when you're done taking your notes, pick one or at most two things that really interested you or got you thinking when you were reading this text, and write about them in paragraph format in a response that really shows your deep thinking about text.